So you have a branch circuit with one 120 volt receptacle or a dedicated branch circuit for a small appliance, water heater, electric motor, or pump that you no longer use, and you'd like to convert it to a 240 volt receptacle or be able to direct wire a 240 volt load. In this video, you'll learn how simple the modification is. You'll also see how to convert a 240 volt receptacle or branch circuit to 120 volts. Let's get started. The receptacle you see here was used for a washing machine. I had a washer and dryer in this room. Both of them have since been moved, and I'd like to use this area, especially to the left of this receptacle in the corner of this room, to put a 220 volt air compressor. So what I need to do in order to have the compressor connected up is switch this 120 volt receptacle to a 240 volt receptacle. Now the circuit that's connected to this right over here is a 20 amp circuit, and the receptacle should be, because it's a 20 amp breaker, a 20 amp receptacle. A 20 amp receptacle looks like what you see right over here. And over the years I've seen many of these 15 amp receptacles used on a 20 amp line, especially for washing machines, and I've never seen a problem with them being able to handle that current. But you should always match up the receptacle to the branch circuit. So if you have a 15 amp line, you want to use the type you see here. If you have a 20 amp line, then you want to use the one that has the extra blade in the center. Before you get started, you need to make sure that there's only one thing connected to the branch circuit. So you're going to plug something into the receptacle, and you're going to have somebody go by the circuit breakers and turn them off one at a time until there's no more power at the receptacle. You could plug in a lamp, or you could use a bar meter tester like you see here, a digital multimeter. It makes no difference. Just check for voltage between the hot and the ground and the hot and the neutral. When you see the voltage is no longer present, you'll know the right circuit breaker has been found. Once you do find the right circuit breaker, you need to go around to the other receptacles and also check out lights. Sometimes people tap into other circuits for lighting. You do not want to have anything else connected to this circuit when you switch it to 240. Make sure there's no lights that turned off when the circuit breaker turned off, and make sure there's no other receptacles. Once you confirm it's just the one, then we can go on to the next step. I'm going to open this up and I'll show you what you have to do. Okay, let me pull this out and turn it this way. Now if you take a look at the rear side of a 120 volt receptacle, you're going to see the screws on this side are brass in color. The black wire is your hot wire. That has 120 volts on it. That connects to the brass screw. The white is neutral. And you can see the screws on this side are silver. And then you have a ground connection going from the ground screw on the receptacle to the metal box. If you have a plastic box, it's not going to be grounded. But then it goes from the box through the conduit back to the breaker panel. Now the most common color for the neutral is going to be white, but it can be gray. And over here for the black wire, the most common for the hot is black, followed by red, then blue, then yellow. So if you see red, black, blue, or yellow, you're going to know that's a hot wire. And then you have the white and gray for the neutral. So let me remove the wires from the receptacle, and we're going to go on to the next step. Now if you look very closely right over here, see that the wire going around the screw goes in a clockwise fashion from this side and around. You want to make sure whenever you put a wire around the screw like this, it's always the same direction. When you go to tighten the screw, it's going to close the loop, allowing a very secure connection. Okay, so this is it right here. The receptacle is bolted onto this cover. So I'd have to undo these bolts to pull the receptacle off. Let me show you the outlet that I'm going to be using. Right over here is a 20 amp 240 volt receptacle. The cover that I'm going to be using is this one right here. It's just going to have one right in the center. If you're using a 20 amp circuit, the gauge of these wires should be number 12. If you're using a 15 amp circuit, then the gauge of these wires is going to be number 14. If you have a 15 amp circuit that you're going to be converting to 240 volts, the receptacle is not going to look like this one here, but it's going to look like the one you see right over here. When the wires are exposed, it's nice to have about 6 inches of wire sticking out. And what I need to do now, this wire here is going to end up a hot wire, just like this one. So what you need to do is you need to wrap this wire with black or red electric tape, or you can do what I'm going to do. I slide some heat shrink over the wire, and then I have a nice red wire over the last 3 or 4 inches, and that's going to be an indication that this is a hot wire. So let me slide this over, heat shrink it, and we'll go on to the next step. Okay, so this is good to go now. It's identified as hot. Now if you have a metal box like you see here with just 2 wires coming out with no ground wire, and you can see that there's a metal conduit, that's an indication that the metal box connected to the conduit is grounded. So you're going to want to take a green ground screw like you see here, and you're going to want to connect up a green wire, just like this. Strip off a 1/2 inch of the end. You're going to make a clockwise loop. You're going to put it over the screw, and you're going to secure it to the box. Now you'll have a ground from the box going to the receptacle. If you had a 240 volt receptacle instead of a 120 volt receptacle, or a 240 volt supply, you would see 2 hot wires. So they'd be both black, black and blue, black and red, or yellows, but they would be 2 hot wires. In that case, if you wanted to convert the 240 to 120, you would have to take one of those wires and make it a neutral wire. And the way to do that is very simple. You go to the circuit breaker, and it would look like what you see right here, a double pole. So there's 1 breaker at the top, 1 breaker at the bottom. Both are tied together with this common trip. 120 volts goes in, comes out over here, in from the bus bar here and out. And if you take the output, or you measure the voltage between both of these screws or both of these openings, you're going to have 240 volts. So what you would do is you would turn the breaker off, then you would unscrew and remove one of the hot wires. Once you do that, you're going to push it off to the side, turn the breaker back on, and you're going to measure between the box, which is grounded, and each one of the hot wires. One is still going to be on, and